3 years later.
My name is Lily Blue, and I am a princess of the Northern Kingdom. My father, the Prime Minister, wields immense power, and my mother, the beloved princess, is cherished by all. As their only daughter, I should have grown up carefree. But I can't seem to find happiness. The reason is simple: I am a soul from another time. 3 years ago, on the eve of General Ethan Song's conquest of my southern kingdom, I chose to stay with my country as its princess. My soul wandered for days and never drank the fabled potion of forgetfulness. This is my third year inhabiting the body of the Northern Kingdom's once innocent princess. From the day I regained consciousness, my mother and father have been overjoyed, clinging to me and refusing to let go.
My dear Lily, you have finally awakened. Heaven has been kind to us. I always worried about who would care for you in your future if we were no longer here.
Tears streamed down his face, only to break into a smile moments later.
Now, my only concern is finding a man worthy of our Lily.
Blushing, I hid in my mother's embrace.
I won't marry anyone. I want to stay with you forever.
My childish words made my parents laugh heartily. At 14, not yet of age, my words were sincere. I had no intention of marrying, especially not someone from the Northern Kingdom. Time passed gently, and life in the Prime Minister's residence was comfortable. My father doted on me immensely. I loved eating sashimi, but fresh sea fish was rare in the inland Northern Kingdom. So, my father ordered daily deliveries from the southern regions.
Anything for my Lily.
I disliked wearing shoes and often walked barefoot on the cold floors, despite the Northern Kingdom's perpetual frost and snow. To keep me warm, my father had the floors heated year-round.
Your happiness means everything to us.
My parents indulged my every whim, even if I asked for the moon. But there was one thing they wouldn't concede: I had to marry.
Lily, just meet him. Minister Zhang's grandson is the top scholar of our time, and he's quite handsome.
I won't. I refuse to meet him. Do you find me a burden? Is that why you're so eager to marry me off?
Hurting my parents again, I didn't care. Since my rebirth, I had become numb and cold. Until he appeared again. On a day when the northern wind ceased and snow fell silently, I sat barefoot under the veranda, catching snowflakes with my hands. Across from me, Ethan Song stood under a plum tree, brushing snow off his shoulders. Sensing my gaze, he turned to look at me. My breath caught, and the coldness of my past washed over me. I stared at Ethan Song, forgetting to pull back my frostbitten hands. He walked towards me, his black cloak billowing in the wind, full of vigor. His eyes lowered, long lashes casting shadows, a faint tear mole under his left eye, and a sharp, slightly angry look in his eyes.
Are you Lily Blue?
I didn't respond, just blinked and continued to look at him, acknowledging his question. 3 years had passed, and he spoke to me again, making me feel as if I were reliving my past life. It reminded me of the night the city was about to fall. I didn't want to depart this world. But my father said that as a princess, it was my duty to uphold the dignity of our nation in its final moments. After drinking a cup of poison, the wind blew through the corridor, gradually taking away my warmth. Weakly, I called my maid, asking her for one last favor, to hide my body so he wouldn't find it. The next day, Ethan Song led his army into the city. My spirit floated above, observing everything coldly like a detached spectator. As expected, he headed straight for my princess residence once he entered the city. The servants and maids were kneeling in fear.
Nina Gu, where is she?
He grabbed a servant, lifting him off the ground.
Sir, our princess. She took her own life in her chamber last night.
The servant stammered, pointing with trembling fingers to a room that had long been charred black by fire. Ethan Song seemed to choke on something, clenching his teeth as he threw the servant to the ground. He looked at the burnt room, his lips, gaze, and entire body trembling. Floating above, I felt relieved that I had asked my maid to hide my body. Otherwise, given his fierce demeanor, he might have desecrated my remains for days. Thankfully. I patted my non-existent chest, feeling a sense of relief. A loud cough from Ethan's song brought me back to reality, reminding me that I was now a princess of the Northern Kingdom. His narrow eyes scanned me up and down, finally locking onto my bare feet.
Is it appropriate for a young lady to meet a man with bare feet?
He said, drawing out his words with a mocking smile. He was still as annoying as he was 3 years ago.
Is it appropriate for a man to enter a lady's private quarters without permission?
He looked taken aback, his eyes darkening, clearly stung by my words. I felt a secret joy. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and it was getting colder. Despite the warmth of the heated floor, I couldn't stop shivering. Just as I was about to return to my room to warm up, Ethan's song spoke again.
It's freezing outside, are you cold with bare feet? Next time, don't go barefoot. Wear shoes and socks.
I looked at him in disbelief. 3 years ago, he had said the same thing to Nina Gu. 2 lifetimes, and he was still so meddlesome.
It's none of your business. I'm not wearing shoes because I'm hot.
I glared at him, wiping imaginary sweat from my forehead.
Heh. The Prime Minister's residence is indeed warm.
He mocked, his eyes narrowing with a hint of a smile. I knew this was a sign of his anger. At that moment, my father came running from a distance, looking as if he were welcoming a distinguished guest. I knew Ethan's song had come to see my father, the Prime Minister, and now that they had met, I thought it was time for me to leave.
Lily, don't go yet. This is the husband I've chosen for you, our Northern Kingdom's general, Ethan Song.
Time seemed to stand still for a few seconds. I stared at Ethan's song, feeling stiff, then looked at my father, who was clearly not allowing any refusal. After a moment, I forced a bitter smile.
Is this true, father?
Ethan's song, being a guest, naturally stayed for dinner. When the servants brought out my favorite dish of sashimi, Ethan's song's expression darkened.
You like eating raw fish?
Is there a problem?
I ignored his question, focusing on enjoying the sashimi. The fresh southern sea fish was tender and sweet, and I thought I could never get enough of it.
No problem. It's just that very few people in the Northern Kingdom enjoy sashimi. Your preference reminds me of someone I used to know.
Hearing him mention Nina Gu so casually, I almost dropped my chopsticks in fear. He must hate me deeply, enough to remember me constantly, enough to regret not ending my life himself.
3 years ago, I had married into the Northern Kingdom. As the youngest princess of the Southern Kingdom, Nina Gu was renowned for her beauty. The third prince of the Northern Kingdom, Arthur Zhou, had fallen in love with me at first sight and came to propose before I turned 15. My father, wanting to strengthen ties between the two kingdoms, agreed to the marriage after much consideration. And so, I embarked on my journey to the Northern Kingdom.
Along the way, Arthur Zhou repeatedly promised to win my favor, assuring me that after marriage, I would be his only one, never taking another wife. Being young and naive about love, I foolishly believed his sweet talk. In the first few days of our marriage, Arthur Zhou was indeed very considerate and affectionate, but it didn't take long for his true nature to reveal itself. It turned out that Arthur Zhou was a notorious playboy in the Northern Kingdom, frequently indulging in various pleasure houses and entertainment venues. One day, Arthur Zhou was once again carried back home, drunk. I, long accustomed to entertaining myself alone, naturally did not show him the concern a wife should have for her husband.
Arthur Zhou is back. Aren't you going to check on him?
Just send him to his room. Why bother me?
Outside, heavy snow was falling. I was sitting barefoot on the heated floor, reading a book. As the door opened, a gust of biting cold wind rushed in, accompanied by a cold voice. Startled by the cold wind, I impatiently responded. As I looked up, I met a pair of cold, stern eyes. The owner of the gaze stood at the bottom of the stone steps, draped in a moonwhite snow feather cloak, tall and upright. The night wind blew his clothes, making him look like a pine tree standing firm on a cliff, enduring years of wind and rain. This was the first time I saw Ethan Song.
The Northern Kingdom is not like the South, the weather is extremely cold. Don't go barefoot anymore. Wear shoes and socks.
He was really meddlesome, a mere companion to a prince, from a humble background. If not for his young age and military achievements, earning him the title of a young general, he wouldn't have the right to speak to me now. I ignored him. Going barefoot was a habit I developed in the Southern Kingdom. Even in the freezing cold of the north, I still preferred not to wear shoes and socks. It was the only way to alleviate some of my homesickness. What did Ethan Song know? So, I made a face at Ethan Song and ran away. The cold was biting, the winter harsh. My first impression of Ethan Song was not good. I didn't like him, and I thought, he probably didn't like me either. Lily? Lily! General Song is leaving. Go see him off. You two are about to get married, this is not inappropriate. My father, the Prime Minister, pulled me back from my drifting thoughts. Yes, now I was a princess of the Northern Kingdom, and Ethan Song was no longer Arthur Joe's companion. We had no enmity. He was my future husband, the one who would accompany me for the rest of my life. The matters of the Southern Kingdom were long past, but facing him, I really had no confidence.
Ethan Song, can you call off the engagement and not agree to marry me?
At the gate of the Prime Minister's residence, I mustered the courage to say to him. Ethan Song was visibly taken aback, then nodded slightly and said,
Do you want that?
After a moment.
Are you Lily Blue?
I didn't respond, just blinked and continued to look at him, acknowledging his question. 3 years had passed, and he spoke to me again, making me feel as if I were reliving my past life. It reminded me of the night the city was about to fall. As a model family, the Song family naturally had to set an example in every aspect. For instance, in frugality. Despite her age, Grandma Song still managed all the household affairs, and her meticulous thriftiness was her hallmark.
Serious, even in the freezing cold, even when the house is bone-chilling, we won't light the floor heating. And no sashimi, no matter how much you request.
Aside from that, well, married life wasn't as bad as I had imagined. Time flies, and the seasons change. Since getting married, Ethan Song often stayed at the military camp, with his visits home being few and far between. It felt like I had returned to the early days of my marriage to Arthur Joe. Arthur came home drunk again that day, but unlike his usual drunken stupor, he was particularly talkative and excited.
Excited, Nina. Do you know? Today at the flower house, everyone envied me for marrying the most beautiful woman in the southern lands.
Arthur staggered over, reeking of alcohol, and hugged me.
Excited, I must be a fool, ignoring the beauty at home and seeking out withered flowers outside.
Arthur leaned in, trying to be affectionate. I thought I might forgive him, until I saw the red rash on his back as he undressed. Arthur's back was covered in red spots, some even festering, looking quite dreadful. Shocked, I pushed him away, ignoring the sudden clarity in his lust-filled eyes.
Angry, Nina Gu. What are you doing?
Arthur, frustrated by my rejection, panted heavily, his desire unfulfilled.
Serious, you should see a doctor about the rash on your back.
Arthur frowned, his face darkening, looking unusually serious.
Angry, Nina Gu, are you rejecting me? Do you know that as a prince of the Northern Kingdom, showing you affection is a blessing for your Southern Kingdom? Ungrateful.
Arthur stormed off in a rage. From that day on, even when Arthur occasionally sought intimacy, I remained unmoved.
Angry, get away from me. Don't touch me.
I struggled, pushing Arthur away as he tried to undress me, sending him sprawling on the floor in a disheveled state.
Shouting, "You heartless woman. I want a divorce."
Serious, that would be best. I can't stay in the Northern Kingdom any longer anyway.
I turned to leave, not wanting to look at the filthy man on the floor any longer. As I opened the door, I met a pair of cold eyes. Ethan Song. I didn't know how much he had heard. He looked at me quietly, with an emotion in his eyes that I couldn't understand. Did he hate me? Perhaps, in his eyes, I was just a heartless woman. So cold. Even though the floor heating in Prince Andrew's mansion was burning hot, I still shivered uncontrollably. I instinctively reached for a blanket but couldn't grasp it, so I cried out.
It's so cold. I want to go home. I want to go back to the south.
But when I woke up with tear-filled eyes, I suddenly found myself lying on the cold floor of the Song mansion, not knowing how long I had been there. And I was no longer Nina Gu.
Someone, light the floor heating in this room.
The voice seemed to come through gritted teeth, unlike his usual cool tone. Ethan Song had returned at some point, lifting me from the floor and carrying me to the bed.
Why didn't you light the floor heating?
Why else? Grandma wouldn't allow it. She's been frugal all her life. I can't upset her over something so trivial.
The more I spoke, the more aggrieved I felt, my voice growing smaller until I couldn't help but cry. Seeing me cry again, Ethan Song seemed at a loss. He gently held me, lowering his head and soothing me softly.
If you're cold, just warm up the room. I'll explain to Grandma.
I looked up at him, puzzled but then understanding. Perhaps he only cared about my status as a princess. As the year-end approached, the heavy snow fell relentlessly, turning the world into a crystalline sculpture. I remembered the ice sculpture lantern festival in the north, which was about to take place. In my past life, I was always preoccupied with arguments with Arthur Joe and regretted never seeing the festival. I thought, maybe this year would be a good chance to make up for that regret. On a whim, I ran to Ethan Song's study. The heavy snow had blocked the mountains these past few days, so he hadn't gone to the military camp for training.
Ethan Song, can you take me to see the Ice Sculpture Lantern Festival tomorrow?
I excitedly pushed open the door and ran to his side. Since he allowed me to light the floor heating last time, our tense relationship had visibly eased. But when Ethan Song saw me enter, he nervously tried to cover a woman's portrait with some calligraphy and paintings. I quickly snatched it away. Strangely, the portrait was torn and pieced back together, and the woman's face was blurred by some means. I looked at it for a long time, finding it very familiar. Ethan Song swiftly took it back and put it away. I didn't ask further, his unnatural expression told me everything. The woman in the portrait was me, Princess Nina Gu of the South. After putting away the portrait, Ethan Song remembered my suggestion. Perhaps annoyed by the intrusion of his privacy, his tone was noticeably irritable.
What's so special about the Ice Sculpture Lantern Festival? I might have to go to the military camp tomorrow, and I don't know when I'll be back.
With that, he turned his back on me, effectively dismissing me. Leaving the study, I wasn't too disappointed, but I lost interest in the Lantern Festival. It turned out Ethan Song hadn't changed, he still harbored the same feelings towards Nina Gu as before. Arthur Joe's health was deteriorating. He ignored my advice to see the imperial physician, instead sending a servant to randomly find a clinic to get some skin treatments, which didn't address the real issue. He spent his days weekly lying in bed, groaning.
Ethan Song, tone, caring Arthur, please, let me call the imperial physician. This isn't just a simple illness.
Arthur Joe tone. Angry I told you, Ethan, I don't need your pity or her advice.
Ethan, Arthur's loyal friend, took on the responsibilities of a caring spouse, staying by his side day and night. I watched all this coldly, unwilling to show Arthur even a shred of sympathy.
Ethan's song, tone, sad Lily, can't you see he's suffering? Why won't you help?
Ethan's eyes always held a hint of resentment whenever he saw me, though he never voiced it. Arthur cursed me from his bed, but I remained resolute, writing a letter of separation, planning to leave.
Lily blue, tone, determined if I wait until he passes away, I might never be able to leave, forever trapped in the cold northern lands.
Narrator, tone, hopeful yes. I must leave the north and head south. As I left Ethan's study, the thought of returning to the southern lands suddenly struck me.
Lily blue, tone, hopeful if my heart yearns for the south, why fear the northern cold?
With just a horse and simple weapons, I chased the moonlight for 700 miles.
Lily blue, tone, determined I could have nothing, but I needed the southern sunshine. The cold's purpose might be to help you find something warmer.
Riding my horse, relying on memories from a past life, I headed south. After half a day, I reined in my horse and looked around. Snow fell softly, the distant mountains and nearby scenery blending into a white expanse, making it hard to discern the way back. Narrator, toned, terrified as the sun was about to set, my only source of direction was disappearing. If I didn't find an inn soon, I might freeze to death in these desolate mountains. I tightened my cloak, whipped my horse, and rode in the direction I had chosen. Narrator, toned, terrified, but before I had gone 2 miles, my horse's hoof slipped, and we fell into a hunter's trap.
Lily blue, tone, despairing would I die again? Could I really not return to the south? It was so frustrating.
Despairing, I sat in the trap, looking up at the cold moonlight, snow hitting my face, making me shiver. My horse had already stopped breathing, lying there, surrounded by a deathly silence. Narrator, toned, terrified, I called out for help, but no one responded. I was so scared, terrified of the warmth leaving my body uncontrollably, afraid of becoming one with the lifeless surroundings. It was getting colder, and I couldn't hold on any longer, falling into an exhausted sleep. I dreamed again, a gentle, hoarse voice drifting to my ears.
Ethan's song, tone, worried Nina, wait for me, don't sleep.
The sound of hooves woke me. I opened my eyes to see a determined jaw with a hint of stubble, tightly pressed lips showing the owner's worry. Narrator, tone, relieved yes, I woke up in Ethan Song's arms.
Lily blue, tone, excited Ethan, how did you find me?
As soon as I spoke, my raspy voice, like sandpaper, reminded me that I was ill.
Ethan's song, tone, gentle don't move, Lily. You're still running a fever. We need to get out of the mountains quickly and find a farmhouse for you to rest.
Ethan tightened the cloak around me, warmth slowly enveloping me from behind. Narrator, tone, relieved his voice was low and soft, with a gentle tone, and I immediately fell asleep in his arms again. The winter scenery was just right, and when I opened my eyes again, I saw smoke curling up from a wooden house. Snow was still falling heavily. Ethan Song dismounted and carefully helped me walk forward. Our footprints were quickly covered by the snow, and before we knew it, we had walked a long way together.
I smiled and brushed the snow off his head, having long forgotten our argument from the previous day.
Ethan Song let me play with his hair without complaint or reproach, just smiling at me with a gentle, affectionate gaze. The hosts were an elderly couple with kind faces. Though we were unexpected guests, they welcomed us warmly. The old lady of the house smiled and assumed we were a married couple, which we were, and prepared a room for us to rest.
After a whole day of travel, my fever returned. The heated Kong bed was warm, and I fell asleep as soon as I lay down. Just as I was about to take off my shoes and socks out of habit, Ethan's song gently stopped me.
Be good, it's cold. Don't go barefoot.
These past few days, Ethan's song had taken care of me meticulously, treating me as if I were his closest loved one. He blushed as he explained how he had to change my clothes himself, and I couldn't maintain my usual composure.
You rogue! Have you been eyeing me for a long time?
I glared at him, pretending to be angry, wearing a floral jacket from the farmhouse.
Injustice. Your wet clothes had to be changed. The old couple thought we were married, so I had no choice. Besides,
Ethan's song looked me up and down, his eyes suddenly brightening with a hint of teasing.
you're as skinny as a monkey, nothing worth eyeing.
How dare you mock me?
I blushed with anger and waved my hand to hit him. Ethan's song laughed and dodged, pulling me into his arms.
This time, I won't back down.
We stayed at the farmhouse for a few more days before planning to return. But my heart was still set on the Southern Kingdom. Watching Ethan's song pack, I hesitated to speak. Ethan's song seemed to notice my hesitation. He stopped what he was doing, walked over, and gently touched my hair.
Come back with me first. When we return, let's go see the ice sculpture lantern show, okay?
I looked up at Ethan's song. He had a smile on his lips, his eyes shining like stars, with the tear mole at the corner of his eye standing out like a star in the galaxy, making my heart race. A few days later, I returned to the song residence. Everything was as usual, except my relationship with Ethan's song had grown closer. On a bright winter day, I finally arrived at the ice sculpture lantern show I had longed to see for 2 lifetimes. The exhibition showcased crystal-clear ice sculptures by various artists, leaving me in awe. At night, the lit ice sculptures offered a different kind of beauty. The lantern stretched for miles, their lights adorning the night. The river below flowed gently, and the snow fell silently on people. Ethan's song's cloak shielded me from the wind and snow. His lips, warm and gentle, touched mine, tasting sweet like the osmanthus wine we had just shared. I could hear my heart beat, strong and alive in the snowy landscape. His robe still carried the cold of the wind and snow, but his demeanor was as gentle as if he were handling a precious treasure. In the warmth of his embrace, everything felt peaceful. Our sweet days didn't last long. Soon, an urgent war report arrived from the south, saying that a young officer under Ethan's song's command had rebelled. Ethan's song and I were sitting on the warm Kong bed, eating fish sashimi when the news came. His face turned pale, and he frowned slightly. As he prepared to change his clothes, he still softly reminded me.
It's still deep winter. While I'm away, don't walk around barefoot.
He changed into his armor and came out from behind the screen, bending down to hug me. The cold armor made me shiver.
Nina, wait for me to come back.
After a moment,
Are you Lily Blue?
he pulled at the corner of his mouth, waiting for a response.
Silently blinks, acknowledging his question.
3 years had passed, and his voice brought back memories, reminding her of the night the city was about to fall.
Palogi.
My name is Ethan Song, a young general of the Northern Kingdom and a companion to Prince Andrew, Arthur Zhou. 5 years ago, Arthur and I, driven by curiosity, secretly ventured into the Southern Kingdom.
Ethan, let's explore the Southern Kingdom. Who knows what adventures await us?
I'm in! Let's see what this kingdom has to offer.
It was there that I met the love of my life. As we wandered, our playful spirits led us to hide in a temple to eavesdrop on the prayers of the Southern Kingdom's devotees.
May our Southern Kingdom's mountains and rivers remain eternal, and the nation be at peace.
As the curtain lifted, a young girl stepped in quietly, knelt devoutly before the Buddha. Her features were delicate and serene, her demeanor exuding an ethereal grace, like a forest fairy stepping on flowers, each step blooming with lotus.
Who is she? She's mesmerizing.
I don't know, but she's something special.
This was the first time I saw Nina Gu. A single glance, and my heart was captured for a lifetime.
Arthur, I think I'm in love.
Ethan, we must be careful. We're in enemy territory.
But just as I decided to confess my feelings to her, Arthur had already asked his father to seek Nina Gu's hand in marriage.
Arthur, how could you? I love her.
She's a princess, Ethan. It's for the good of the kingdom.
I was just an unknown young general, and I knew I couldn't compete with Arthur for the woman I loved. So I refused to participate in any activities related to Arthur and Nina Gu's wedding, thinking that if my heart remained unmoved, it wouldn't hurt.
I can't be part of this, Arthur. I hope you understand.
You're making a mistake, Ethan.
I was wrong. That day, Arthur was drunk beyond measure, and I had no choice but to take him home. At that moment, I saw Nina Gu again.
Nina, are you okay?
Why do you care? Leave us alone.
Nina Gu, barefoot and quietly reading, frowned at my interruption, and showed impatience at my concern, but to me, she was incredibly endearing. There was only one thing that pained me: Nina Gu had grown thinner. Arthur's indulgence in revelry grew worse, and his relationship with Nina Gu seemed to have hit rock bottom. When I saw Arthur trying to force himself on Nina Gu, as a bystander, I couldn't intervene, nor could I offer her gentle comfort. My heart ached terribly.
Arthur, you don't deserve her.
Stay out of this, Ethan.
Sometimes, I wished I could end Arthur's life myself. If he had won her heart, why couldn't he cherish her? Perhaps the heavens heard my wish. When Arthur fell gravely ill, Nina Gu left a letter of separation and returned to the southern kingdom with dignity.
Nina, you're free now.
My heart was relieved, but only for a moment before it tightened again. Nina Gu, when will we meet again? Not long after Arthur's death, the Northern Kingdom launched a campaign against the Southern Kingdom, using a flimsy excuse that even a child wouldn't believe, that Arthur died of longing for Nina Gu.
Ethan, you will lead the attack.
Yes, Your Majesty.
I felt both troubled and excited. But in the end, I set out with a mix of excitement and apprehension, leading my troops southward.
Nina Gu, wait for me. No matter what happens, I will protect you for the rest of your life.
However, I failed to keep my promise. After breaching the city gates, I rushed to the princess's residence to find her, only to hear that she had ended her life in the fire.
No. Nina.
That night, I collapsed on my bed, tears streaming down my face. If I could go back in time, I would choose not to know you. It's not that I regret it, I just can't face the current outcome. Nina Gu has been gone for 3 years, and I've lived like a walking corpse for 3 years. Even though I've been promoted and honored, my heart remains unmoved. Until I met her again.
General Ethan, I have a political matter to discuss with you.
What is it, Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister of the Northern Kingdom invited me to his home to discuss some political matters, with a mysterious demeanor. I knew he wanted to marry his daughter, who had just regained her senses, to me.
I'll meet her.
Perhaps life had become too dull, so I went to the courtyard of the Prime Minister's daughter, Lily Blue, out of curiosity. When I saw this girl sitting barefoot under the eaves, playing with the snow, dressed in a blue robe, her features delicate, her skin fairer than snow.
Nina? Could it be?
I was stunned. Had Nina Gu returned? So I suddenly became interested in her, finding her extremely endearing. Even her love for sashimi was just like Nina Gu's.
Forgive my selfishness. I accepted this marriage with joy.
But she seemed to resist me greatly. Why?
I don't want this marriage.
Perhaps she was still young, but it didn't matter. Nina Gu, I could wait for you.
Fate loves to play tricks. After our marriage, I became busier, spending my days training in the military camp, unable to accompany my Nina.
I'll be back soon, Lily.
I treated her as a substitute without caring about what she truly wanted. I didn't care if she felt cold without shoes and socks, nor did I go out of my way to buy sashimi, only occasionally teasing her.
Do you miss me, Lily?
Leave me alone.
But until one day, I heard her mutter in her sleep that she wanted to return to the Southern Kingdom.
What did you say, Lily? Southern Kingdom?
This startled me. Trembling, I picked her up from the cold floor, trying hard to find evidence that she was indeed Nina Gu.
Lily, are you Nina Gu?
Perhaps I didn't know Nina Gu well enough. Lily Blue was innocent and lively, unlike Nina Gu's calm and strength. I tried to convince myself that they were not the same person.
They can't be the same.
Princess Lily Blue was mischievous every day. One day, she barged into my study, saying she wanted to see the ice sculpture lanterns.
Ethan, let's go see the ice sculptures.
What are you doing here? This is my private space.
I was angry at her for coming uninvited and for seeing my hidden secret. At that moment, I was looking at a portrait of Nina Gu. Although I had deliberately blurred her face, she still lived clearly in my heart.
Nina.
Lily Blue was not the first to see my secret. 3 years ago, Arthur accidentally saw the portrait of his wife in my study. He was furious, tore it up, and angrily warned me to stay away from his wife, Nina Gu.
Stay away from her, Ethan.
I can't control my heart, Arthur.
But I couldn't control my own heart. So I cruelly refused her invitation, but seeing her disappointed expression, I felt no joy.
No, Lily. Go back to your room.
The next day, I was on my way to the military camp as usual, but halfway there, I regretted it. My mind was filled with Lily Blue's sad face. I thought I might have fallen in love with her.
I need to see her.
But when I returned home, the servant said she was missing. I panicked. Where could she go in this heavy snow?
Where is she? Find her now!
I rode my horse, boldly guessing that Lily Blue might have returned to the Southern Kingdom. To confirm my suspicion, I rode southward, and within half a day, I found Lily Blue in the mountains.
Lily. Thank goodness I found you.
Trembling, I rescued her from a trap, hardly believing the reality. I held her in the snow, crying and laughing like a fool.
You're safe now, Lily.
I thought, the cherry blossoms at the chicken temple must be blooming because my Nina Gu had returned. The spring light was as intoxicating as wine, the flowers were mesmerizing, the night was clear as water, and the moon washed away the mundane. I lived a period of comfortable married life with Lily Blue, but now, looking back, such a life was beyond my reach. One day, a soldier reported that a young general under my command had rebelled with the commander's seal. I was shocked but also somewhat aware. I prepared to handle the matter quietly.
We must act swiftly and discreetly.
Because I knew it had something to do with Lily Blue. Not long ago, I had discovered the true identity of that young general.
Nathan Gu. Nina's brother.
His name was Nathan Gu, Nina Gu's youngest brother. When I chased him to the other side of the river, I heard Nathan Gu loudly instruct me.
Take good care of my sister.
I will, Nathan. I promise.
I wanted to let everything go and take Nina Gu to live in seclusion. But I was ultimately too late. Yes, I lost my beloved once again.
No, not again.
I caressed Nina Gu's portrait, murmuring,
There are tall trees in the south, but they cannot be rested upon. There are wandering girls in the Han, but they cannot be pursued.